Lately, I've been reading a lot of manga, and have been discovering a bunch of new series, which for me is always a treat since I love discovering new stuff. And after reading a particular series, which I will talk about later, I've been thinking about one of my favorite things about the medium of manga, which is how creative you can get with the panels and pages. So today, I'd like to look at a few examples of some of my favorite moments where panel and page composition are done in such an effective manner that makes me feel the same way I do about amazing directing and animation that I get from anime. Mikako-san is a manga from Kyo Machiko, which is basically about, as you guessed, a girl named Mikako and her growth through her last stretch of high school. It's a mix of a slice of life with some bits of drama, and I would classify it as hard realism. It's very grounded. And I swear I'm not using Mikako-san as an example because this season has one of my favorite realism slice of life shows in the form of Yesterday. Check out my thoughts on that. But this manga is honestly so good. And part of why I was so hooked was because of its presentation. In part due to its very lo-fi, chill art style 24 hours to study to, but also with the use of its medium. As we see more of Mikako's daily life, including some of her hobbies like listening to bands, buying new lip balm, being unsure of what she wants to do in life, we also meet one of her good friends, Nao. In this chapter, Nao talks a lot, according to Mikako, and there's two very cool things that are done to make something as simple as that way more elegant. The first thing is this sneaky hourglass, which, in terms of panel composition, gets two panels dedicated to it. During its first inclusion, it quickly loses focus as Nao keeps talking. We then regain that focus when we're given this close-up. We are forced here to think about this hourglass. Then we see this. The page composition here is so simple by design, yet the execution of it is so great. Just like an hourglass, the words from Nao are literally falling into Mikako. Not only is this beautiful parallel formed by having this metaphor of falling words shown to us visually, but it also forces us to pay attention to this moment. It's just Mikako's best friend talking, but it also, the more you stare at it, seems to drag on. Your eyes get strained, and it's almost tiring to look at this panel. But she's a good friend, so she listens, resets the hourglass, and lets her rant, and we can imagine that as it moves on, it'll only ever feel like this. Let's look at another chapter. This one is maybe a bit more meaningful since it deals with exploring Mikako's character more closely. She's unsure of her future prospects, as is the norm for a lot of high school kids, and she also forgot her phone somewhere, which is kind of like not knowing your future plans. They're both terrifying. However, we then get this single panel on this page. It's very simple, not as bombastic in form as the last one, but it in combination with the dialogue is just so beautiful. And this is one of the cases where the framing of the panel or page really reflects the simplicity and aesthetic of the manga as a whole, and the journey she's going through. She is literally calling herself to find her phone, but also stares in the mirror to try and find herself. And the dialogue in conjunction with this makes that effect much more powerful. Everything else around this panel is muted in white, and our eyes are drawn to the few droplets of color, which is the phone booth, and then her face in the reflection. We are unable to see Mikako directly in this moment, just like how she feels she can't see or understand what she wants to do. She can only see what other people see, which is this outward reflection. Both of these examples do something very crafty, letting the form of their medium really help in showing off characterization and even some of the themes in very engaging ways that really helped me get into the world and really get invested in everything that happened. These kinds of formal moves and composition are to me what directing and movement is in anime. And I have plenty more examples I can draw from, but let's use the one I was mentioning in the beginning. I recently discovered Shoujo Chetan, or Dictionary Girl, by Yasui Mari. Basically, it's about this girl named Yachiko who moves into a girl's dormitory and meets a ghost named Giko, who is carrying a notebook where he collects information about girls. It's honestly really fun to read, and I got hooked onto it very quickly. It's a great blend of comedy, slice of life, episodic character-based storytelling, along with some serious larger arc stuff, which is threaded between the girls we learn about. I was fully expecting just this really quirky yokai ghost type story with just a little more edge and crass humor than the typical supernatural type manga I enjoy, but what I got out of it was amazing work in craft. During the first chapter, we learn a lot about Yachiko, particularly about why she's moving into this haunted dormitory and her family situation. We also learn about the ghost Giko, who is more friendly than your average ghoul. During the events of this chapter, the parents scope out where Yachiko, who has run away from home, has run off to, and enters the dormitory. But Giko quickly scares them off. However, Yachiko gets caught by her mom. In a last-ditch effort to hide her, Giko pulls off all the stops and gives us this page. I guess there technically are 2 panels on this page, if this counts as its own panel, being spliced into the main page. But yeah, no, this is such a visually striking page that immediately draws you in by the rough and flowing dark ghost body thing that Giko is doing that takes up a good portion of the page and threatens to swallow everything up as it's covering so much ground. Of course, Giko is also swallowing Yachiko and dragging her through the walls as much as he is covering the page, and so there's that level of the form matching with the content, just like in Mikako-san. The more you look at this page, the more you begin to notice how distorted and well depicted I think Giko is, as his body is curving towards Yachiko, and all of his tendril ghost things are also curving around her as well. And it's not just that he's forcing his way over her, but that he's dripping and oozing out of the wood. It's this really trippy perspective that also works for the fact that he's a ghost and it should feel out of this world. Ghosts aren't the only one in this manga that are out of this world. In another chapter, we learn about Kotori Hidaka, a member of the Space Engineering Club who's trying to fly and go to space. Throughout the course of the chapter, we learn about her motivations and delusions, and are made quickly aware of how impossible and sad her reasoning is. To put it short, she thinks by being able to fly to the moon, she'll be able to meet with an old childhood friend. And in class, she hears these words, "I don't see any God up here," which sets her off. But before we go to the main page, I want to show an honorable mention to how this moment was represented. It's a simple, non-background type deal. This panel is so focused on just her, and it really does a lot to visually show how monumental those words were and how they had affected her to the point where everything else in that moment didn't matter. It was just her, and she acts accordingly as she bolts out of the class not caring for anything, being lost in her own memory. And then we get this. This page, with 5 panels, if you want to count it like that, maybe even 6 if you count Kotori herself, blew me away for many reasons. It's a visual representation of her stepping on stairs, with each stair being a period of her life. It goes from childhood to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, up here, and then her imagined future of being an astronaut. Just like how these moments in our lives can often be considered as stepping stones for our futures, propelling us forward towards where we want to be, Kotori here is literally using them as stepping stones to move forward with her trauma and to face her past. Even note the carefully placed step here of jumping from the middle school days, since that technically is the last big milestone of her life, and moving towards this perceived future. The clever composition of each panel being a stair step with the entire page laid out in this intuitive way that you can see her movement is all so great. This is a beautifully depicted metaphor, and this manga is full of moments like this where the page is used in such interesting and creative ways to heighten moments, further emphasizing certain themes and characters and being such a visual treat. A visual treat is what I would often associate with great animation and directing, but that same feeling of visual acuity is present in so much manga, and as much as I love watching some amazing, well-done set piece, I am equally as amazed at the same amount of creative energy and movement in what is commonly considered as a static medium.